Welcome to my webinar today. For those of you who are not exposed to me, and there's a few of you here that have never heard me before, I studied globalization at MIT a few years ago. I then visited many countries and visited hundreds of outsourcing businesses. I actually started personally using offshoring about 9 years ago. 4 years ago I got very, very serious about it, and right now I have about 300 people in Australia and about 80 people in the Philippines working for me. I have stuff in China, I've got stuff in Hong Kong, the Philippines and Australia. I've currently got about 6 businesses, maybe 8 businesses, depending on what you call a business, I suppose. I teach how to offshore, so I'm a doing it guy. I kind of walk the talk. And today's is coming from that experience and my frontline knowledge. 9 or 10 years ago, you guys would have listened to me, and I was spouting on and on about Odesk and how Odesk is going to change the world. Today is not about Odesk, it's about the next thing after Odesk. But I thought I'd share this slide with you at the start because this was released recently by Odesk, and this is some of their numbers. Odesk today have got 99.3 million registered freelancers working in it, and 36 million registered businesses. It's a serious business, and it is really disrupting the market. And what's really interesting, the Australian-known freelancer is right behind it with these numbers today. So, you know, that's pretty big numbers. That's a pretty big change in the world. So the change that I'm sharing, the offshoring change, is big. It's coming at you, and it's going to change the way you do things. Business is really about sourcing everything you need. Customers, products and services, and now people, that's why it's in red, at world's best value. And the best way for me to explain this to you is to talk about a business that I am a major shareholder in that started about 18 months ago. We're still rolling it out now, but it's looking very good. A couple of very clever guys down in Brisbane, Australia, decided to invented a deep sea diving light using the very latest LED technology, very latest battery technology. They came to me, I liked the idea, I decided to invest in the company, did a little bit of market research, it seems viable, it looked good, so we incorporated a company in Hong Kong. It's almost identical to doing a company in Australia. It takes about a week. It's a British system, so it has managing directors in all the same language as opposed to the American system with vice presidents and stuff. We then went to China, where we have about 7 different places manufacture the different parts of the lights. We assemble them in China. We warehouse in China, and we drop ship them from China anywhere in the world within a couple of days. We use the Philippines for administration and sales. And we sell the product, or we're starting to sell the product, into the markets where there's lots of money. And if you look very carefully at that business model, that is the new business model that's evolving out of the internet. Businesses today can source everything they need at world's best value, whether it be the incorporation, whether it be the manufacturing or the products, whether it be the administration and the sales, or whether it be the customers. Every part of your business should be at world's best value, where the best value is represented. And if you build a business like that, you're going to be sustainable into the future. Nothing's going to hold you back. So that's the world I live in, the world's things. So some common technology, let's talk about some common terminologies that I'm sharing today when I'll be talking. When I use the term outsourcing, I mean somebody else does the work for you. Right? Most of you do outsource. Most of you outsource in Australia. You outsource at least your accountancy work to an accountant. That's outsourcing. The outsourcing, of course, that we're commonly talking about is outsourcing overseas, and later on I'll share with you how that's got problems and it's not working very well, particularly for smaller businesses, and how that actually caused the industry to get a bad name. The term that I like using is offshoring. Offshoring is all about getting your work done for you in another country. And obviously that's about using the cheaper wages in another country. And that's pretty well what we'll be talking about today as we go through. BPO is a term that's misused a lot nowadays. It means business process outsourcing. Today it's used as a general term to describe the industry. Quite often people will switch the words BPO and offshoring very, very randomly, meaning the same thing. KPO is a term you'll hear quite occasionally. It's about knowledge process outsourcing. It kind of explains the accountancy businesses and the engineering businesses and those sort of things. Getting people to think rather than follow processes is probably the other way of describing that. Crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is using a group of people to get results. And there's a couple of logos down the bottom there. You're looking at a logo for IBPAP. IBPAP is the IT and Business Process Association of the Philippines. It's a government-sponsored body in the Philippines that oversees the industry. Very well connected and very well thought after. You'll hear that term quite a bit. And you also, if you're ever up here, everybody will be talking all the time about PEZA. PEZA stands for the Philippines Economic Zone Authority. It really has no bearing on you guys at all. Everybody throws it at you all the time and it sounds impressive. The special economic zones with tax incentives and everything else. The reality is that most of you are kind of operating as branch offices off your Australian business, and if you're doing that, you're not transferring surplus profit up here. So if you're not transferring surplus profit up here, there's no need to have any tax advantages at all. So that doesn't help you. So the country we're talking about is the Philippines. 105 million people, medium age 23.3 years and falling. 1/3 of the 105 million people are under the age of 15 years. If you want to know what Australia is, Australia at the moment is 37.3 years and we're rising. We're getting older. So the Philippines getting younger. A literacy rate of 92.6%. Right? Over 100 years ago, this became a colony of the USA. They put in the education system and they made it compulsory in English. So these guys have been well educated in English for over 100 years, which nowadays makes it the third largest English-speaking country in the world. Of interest is also that 92.5% are Christian. Therefore, they share very, very similar values to us. This is probably the least Asian of all the Asian countries. They have a workforce of 39 million people, 500,000 college grads a year, and we'll give a breakdown on that shortly. The industry, the offshoring or BPO industry, as it's known today here, is about an $18 billion a year industry, and it's growing at the rate of 20% a year. It has very, very strong government backing and good solid foundations, and currently 1.2 million Filipinos are employed servicing Western businesses. Of that 1.2%, 75% are working for them for the USA businesses. Fundamentally, that means they start work at 10 o'clock at night and finish at 4 o'clock in the morning. And that's, if you come up here, you'll see the massive numbers of tall buildings around that are servicing this industry. The lights are all on at night. And also makes us the flavour of the month because Australians come up here and instead of working in the middle of the night, they can work for us during the day. So it's quite easy for us to poach them out of the USA business across to us. Right now, we have about 150,000 Filipinos working for Australian businesses, and that's growing really rapidly. They're on the Western Australian time zone. And it's actually a challenge. They're very, very Americanized. So accents aren't a problem. Education is not a problem. Americanization is one of the challenges that you've got to have to deal with when you come up here. The output from the universities, here's 2013 numbers. Medical and natural sciences, 158,000. Business, accounting and related fields, 120,000. Social behaviour sciences, education, 67,000. Engineering and architecture, 57,000. IT-related mathematics, 57,000. And fine arts, 13,000. Why do I suspect in Australia to be around the other way? That'll be the high one. And so that's half a million coming out in 2013. That number's pretty stable. If not, it's rising each year, and the ratio is staying about the same. Employed in the in the industry, in the BPO industry, and virtual are not included in these numbers. These numbers are from BPAP, so they're only about 80% of the market actually. Voice right now is still employing about 586,000 people. Non-voice, which is your BPOs, your KPOs, staff leasing and all those things I'm going to introduce you to later, you're looking at 169 or 170,000. IT is 71,000. Health is growing rapidly. It's 65,000. The reason for the rapid growth is the Americanization of the health system. They've poured all their resources into here to try and support that change. Engineering services, 11,000. Animation, employed at the moment in animation, working for Western businesses, about 9,200 Filipinos, and the gaming industry, about 3,500 as well. This slide always causes a lot of interest when I show it to people. This is what they're really paid. Now, do a big disclaimer here. This is what they are paid in the same way that you would probably pay an administration worker in Australia about $700 a week. That's not what the work is costing you. Obviously, you've got other costs as well added onto that. To bring it up. So your office costs, your administration costs, your compliance costs, and of course your normal standard upselling cost of your superannuation, work cover, and all things. So this is what they're paid just before tax. So this is gross pays, generalised, and this is in Manila. It is a lot lower in the provinces. So housemaids here, housemaids are paid $20 per week. A teacher in Manila, a teacher's earning $47 per week. And the interesting ones are the yellow ones. What I've got is split the screens here. The outsourcing, offshoring industry, sorry, the offshoring industry or the BPO industry has created an artificial wage band which is higher than anywhere else. It's stable, it's not going up because it's got more being fed into it than it's employing. It's got its artificial thing, and you can see it in this yellow one. If you're an administration worker, pretty standard, you'd have 1 or 2 degrees in Manila, university degrees. You would, working for a large Philippines company or the Philippines government, you would typically be on $53 per week. If you're the same person working in the offshoring industry here for an Australian company or American company, you would typically be getting $146 per week, which is nearly 3 times the local rate of pay. So that very much makes our industry the flavour of the month. Let's have a look at why we offshore. Look, fundamentally, we're coming up because of the lower wages. The wage difference is enormous. But the office costs are also lower up here as well. So when we put the two together, it becomes a very, very viable proposition. What are we using it for? Well, we're using it to remain competitive. We're being squeezed from everywhere. Our profits are being squeezed. It's being squeezed by globalisation. Most of us up here use it to add to our business offer. We use it to improve and add more processes, marketing and customer experiences. I certainly did that with the Mini Movers operation up here. We use it to access higher productivity. We use it to develop new businesses, and it's a great conduit to overseas markets. If you want to sell stuff into the USA, this is the place to come because these guys are used to dealing with Americans all the time. They fall into that very well. So today the difference goes into our pocket as profit. Tomorrow we're going to be offshoring for survival. This is a photo taken from my condo in Manila. That entire area that you can see in the background there, all those buildings did not exist 6 years ago. The whole lot's growing. Daily more cranes come and more cranes go. It's absolutely amazing how fast they're building it. All the buildings are pre-sold. There's no vacancy rates here. It's squeezing obviously the cost of buildings is being squeezed as a result. There's hundreds of businesses coming up here every week from Australia, and it's very, very much like a gold rush. This is an interesting slide. I think this is the one when we're going to start getting to the nitty-gritty and you start going to learn more about, this is the real stuff. I call it the engagement path. If you can tick each part of this list or process, then you're going to have nailed it. So let's look at the typical path that's creates a great worker. Number 1, start small, then learn to duplicate. Look, I see lots of people biting off more than they can chew. There's a learning curve. You've all got to go through it. You've got to minimise the risk by starting it in an affordable way. It took me 3 months from hiring one before I engaged another 3. Once I did that, nothing stopped us. We just continued. But it took us the first 3 months to learn some tricks, to make some mistakes, and to learn what we're doing. So start small, then learn to duplicate, and then let it go. Do not try and start big. It's a big mistake I see here. Number 2, cut your deal with a space and employment provider. Choose them very carefully. Look, I'll cover more around the different alternatives shortly, but the Philippines is like every country in the world. The big city has higher wages, more staff turnover, so things like sharing tacit knowledge and location become very much part of your considerations. You need to use common sense, you really do, and think carefully about the provider you're going in with. It's difficult to change providers after you start. And if you are going to grow big and ultimately exit or do something like that, you need to make sure that you can do that as well. There's lots of different aspects to look at. Number 3, find good candidates. Cast a wide net. Look, honestly, this is really a really fascinating area. I'm going to do another webinar very shortly on this subject alone, and I'll tell you more about that at the end. It costs next to nothing, say, to Filipinos. Sorry. It costs next to nothing, say 2 days Filipino wages to assess hundreds of candidates. So advertise and promote everywhere, then use a cheaper resource to assess what you need. Don't rely on your provider only. Spread the net wide. More candidates you get going in, the more you get to choose from, the better you're going to get. The Philippines is very much like Australia. There are some bad ones and there's some good ones, and you've got to work your way through to get the good ones to work for you properly. Number 4, assess to the core needs of the task. Test. Look, stop reading resumes, will you? Honestly, they embellish, they really do. Determine the core skills, not the qualification or experience. Test to the core skills. Again, the webinar I mentioned before that I'm getting our next webinar, I'm really going to share a lot about what I've done here, including some of my very simple but very effective testing methods I've got to get some of the wonderful people I've got working with me today. Number 5 is engage in a desirable workplace. Guys, you've got to build a workplace that people want to come to every day. It's really, really important. It's the same up here as it is down there. It's no different. Check out Zappos on YouTube if you want to know what a fantastic workplace looks like. Look, you've got to trust. You've got to have trust. You've got to have caring, fun, and productivity. They all go hand in hand. Interestingly, a very strong family culture up here means Filipinos have a very different expectation of their work experience environment. So you need to understand that they are different. There is some cultural differences here, and you need to adjust to it. It means, by the way, that shiny, clean, and sparkling may not be their thing. They may prefer to be all close together and sharing things in a real family-type environment. It's quite different in the way we think sometimes. Number 6, you've got to transfer you. You've got to transfer your vision. You've got to set ultimate goals and expectations. It's about leadership. Look, guys, you're the leader. It's your role. You must be clear where the business is heading and with your expectations, and then communicate it over and over again. In Mini Movers, I've had a BHAG for nearly 25 years now. The BHAG, very simple. One day, Mini Movers will be a bigger brand name worldwide than McDonald's. And I also have a story about the first job we did, how we went out and did a job and we turned it into fun, how the guys worked like legends, how they didn't damage anything, how we did whatever the customers needed, and at the end of it we did it with a price that made sense for the customer because we let them control the price. I tell that story in such a way that it paints the perfect picture, it paints the picture of the perfect job. So when you start with Mini Movers, in the more management roles, you get the BHAG, you get it over and over again, you know exactly where we're ultimately heading, and you also, everybody in Mini Movers gets I paint the picture about the perfect job and what it looks like, and that becomes where we're heading, what we're always trying to achieve. It's important that you do that. You're the leader. You've got to do that with your team up here as well as you do in Australia. I'm seeing people coming up here not doing that stuff and then having strife. They're not engaging, they're not connecting with the people up here. They're the same. You need to do that. Number 7 is, look, use simple set processes. and avoid bogging down with new technology. I really see so many people spending so much time trying to change or add new technology when you could have sat there with a simple Word document, run out a simple list of what you want to train in, and sat down with the person and done one-on-one training with a checklist list beside you, and it is as simple as that. It's no more complicated than that. And I'm seeing people going off doing all sorts of weird, wonderful things when it really is simple. You need to have a simple process down in a Word document, listed down, to be a very effective training program. And indeed, in a future webinar, I'm going to go into that in great detail about how to build simple systems, because I see so many people complicating what is really quite simple. Number 8, teach one-on-one. Look, the best teachers are those that are currently doing the job. In SMEs, you cannot have set processes for everything. None of us do. Certainly your core business will have some structured processes, but I bet your back office processes are not. Those that are doing the best training are simply the person doing the job, who they can explain it to the new person, but you need a structure to follow to make sure everything's covered. It's really, really important. It is so simple, it really is. Number 9, set KPIs. Now, achievable and clear expectations. I know, I can tell you, all my Australian workers are horrified about KPIs. They hate the idea of KPIs. But the American influence up here has really had a big effect. These guys love KPIs. And if you don't give it to them, they wonder what they're doing. They'll come and say, sir, we're a bit lost. We don't know what we need to do. You need to set KPIs up here. And you need to manage to those set KPIs. There is a bit of a thing up here that a lot of the previous industry has been about hiring process workers and running structured process. That's changing now. That's what I'm going to show you in some of the different modes I'm about to roll out. The difference is that now SMEs are coming up here. We want thinkers, but they've still got to work within the KPI systems. Number 10, use software to track your work. Look, there are some really cool stuff that you can use up here. Time Doctor, Work Snaps are two of the many solutions that can track what work they're doing on the computer and give you simple reports about what they're doing. It's a really cost-effective way to track your productivity. And those of you who use hourly rate people in Odesk will know that it does it automatically as well, but you can get programs outside of that to do as well. So track using software. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It's very, very easy to do. Number 11, manage them to your expectations. This is back to the KPIs, guys. So it amazes me how many of you give them tasks to the workers and then nothing. You expect amazing results. Without being too micro, you really need to be on top of what you're doing. I get detailed weekly reports and I react to the odd thing. You need to watch their work. The KPIs are your benchmark. Enforce them. That's the expectation. Right? If you're going to set the KPIs, make sure you enforce them. They don't mean anything if you don't enforce them. And they expect you to. That's the common sense of it. Number 12, use Filipinos to manage Filipinos with Westerners overseeing. Look, there are cultural differences. There's much less cultural differences in the Philippines than most other countries, but only Filipino can manage Filipino. Trust me, I watch people trying to directly manage Filipinos, and they constantly see us as insulting and upsetting because of our manner. It's a learning curve for us all. They're mild and meek. They're a little bit subservient. We're the opposite. We can be brash, direct, and that really offends or insults a Filipino, and it puts them off. That's why you need Filipino managing Filipino. But you do need a Westerner overseeing it. And that Westerner doesn't have to be up here. They can be in Australia. But that Westerner has to know the names, the partners' names, and the birth dates of every worker here and be connected with them and talk to them quite regularly. It's really important you do that. Number 13 is simply stay connected with your people. It's really the same as managing, but you've really got to know your people and stay connected with them. It's vital. I see so many people not connecting with them, putting people up here and then leaving them alone, not doing anything with them, having it all fall over. You've got to really connect with them. We're getting a few people asking about Zappos. Zappos. Zappos is a company that was set up by a guy called Tony Hurst. If you put Zappos into YouTube and connect through, he's made some wonderful videos. He created a workplace culture which was very, very different than anywhere else. He took his marketing budget and stopped marketing the company and poured the marketing budget back into his call center and on his staff to create a wow, fantastic, fun place. It's a pretty serious operation. It got sold 2 or 3 years ago to Amazon for $1.2 billion with a B. And they really hadn't made a profit. And Amazon brought it because they wanted to import the workplace culture into their business. So it's a really good thing to see. Go and have a look at the videos thing. So let's have a look at some of the basic offshoring engagement instructions. All right. Well, there's one thing that we tell everybody when they first come up. Do not incorporate. This is not like Australia in any respect whatsoever. It is totally different. It is very, very different. I don't want to spend the whole webinar going on about how different it is. Unless you're starting with at least 30 seats, and that's not all, you have at least 3 years experience in the Philippines, do not incorporate. Leave it alone. It's simply too hard. It's too difficult. It does all sorts of things. It exposes you to corruption. Exposure to a manual bureaucratic nightmare. So just don't incorporate, which means you're going to need somebody else to provide the legal entity. And that's what the rest of these slides are really about. It's about other people providing the legal entity. The history of the industry is that 20-odd years ago, the very large multinational corporate companies discovered that they could move initially call centers into countries that got a lot lower wages. Poland was one, Ireland, India, and of course the Philippines. Very large corporate companies run very, very set structured processes, and they were able to drop processes in. They decided they didn't want to incorporate in these countries either. So a third-party provider grew up and developed. Today I call them corporate BPOs. Right? They provide a full solution. Companies like Convergys, which I believe has got about 70,000 employees at the moment, Cytel, which is a fairly small one with about 25, 30,000 employees, Teleperformance is up there, Accenture's there. The largest one is an Australian owned is a company called Acquire in Australia. I think they're running at about 7,000 employees. They're very, very big. They target large corporate businesses. They really don't want to talk to you if you've got less than 20 seats, and they pretty well, most of them want to promise that you're going to go to 100 seats pretty quickly. They typically charge $15 to $18 an hour. It's a fully managed service. You give them the process, they give you the results. So they take care of the staff completely, but they are a trap for the smaller players. 7 or 8 years ago, small and medium businesses, because of cloud computing, were able to access more and more of these lot cheaper resources. So they went to the corporate BPOs, and the corporate BPOs ran some projects for them, and it all got wobbly. And it all got wobbly. If you talk to the corporate BPOs, and I know most of them today, they'll tell you that the little guys they took on didn't have their systems weren't robust enough. If you talk to the little guys that did it, namely a lot of accountancy firms in Australia and engineering firms, they'll say that they were a small fish in a big sea, and they weren't listened to. But the thing is, they were completely not matched for each other. Small SMEs and the corporate BPOs can't run each other, and that pretty well, that's why outsourcing got such a bad name. It really did, and it's why people go on and on, oh, I don't want to outsource, I won't do it. We tried it a few years ago. Well, the world's changed. There's different ways of doing it now, ways that are a lot more productive. But I'm just warning you, keep away from the corporate BPOs. Some of them still like to talk to the little guys, but they really are problems if you do that. You will get into all sorts of strife. The one we started talking about at the start, that I started talking about 9 years ago, is still out there. Freelancers, independent, virtual independents. typically home-based, occasionally small teams. Look, we've had somebody ask a question what a BPO is. I went through the meaning of BPO before. It stands for Business Process Outsourcing. Offshoring and BPO are sort of industry terms for the same thing now. They've gone a little bit past the exact meaning. We call it the BPO industry, Business Process Outsourcing. It's the but it's moved past that really. So the two biggies the big one of course is Odesk. Today they own Elance, that's why they've got them up there side by side. To give you an idea of growth, in 2012 Odesk had 2.7 million freelancers. Today in 2015 they have 9.3 million freelancers. That's growth. What's really fascinating is that USA is the biggest user of Odesk. The second largest user of Odesk in the world is Australia. So there's a lot of Australians there. And the next one down is Freelancer. Look, you can't get the numbers properly. The way they put the numbers out is quite weird, but it appears that Freelancer is almost the same size as Odesk. Although Freelancer themselves are claiming they're bigger than Odesk, and Freelancer is still 100% owned in Australia. So I think that's a great thing for us. It really is. Look, the good for odd projects or part-time expertise. I use them today, still use them for full-time standalone workers. My PA is an Odesker. I keep her away from all my other businesses. She is my personal assistant, so she's an Odesk. Sitting beside me today, going to sleep while I'm doing the presentation, that's fine. They range, people on Odesk range in quality from poor to really good, and you've got to test. Do not read the resumes. Test them. You've got to test them to find the good ones, and you have to dig through a lot to find good ones. I'll be honest with that. Typically they're $4 to $8 an hour, but that's a final cost. There's no other costs on top of that. No office costs or anything else. Look, one of the big weaknesses of the virtual independents, even with that growth, is that we're discovering that teams in their own space sharing tacit knowledge is far, far more productive. And with Odesk, they're not all in the same space. They're all working from homes. So you're not getting the tacit sharing that SMS need to grow. And that's a weakness. And for that reason, if you want to build a team, you really can't use the virtual system. Crowdsourcing is another one, particularly specialized solutions. They're a quick answer for very small, for specialized tasks. 99 Designs is a big one. Excuse me. It's a great way to design a website or design a brochure. You go in there and they put it up to bid, and a whole lot of different people bid on it, and you can select the winner out of that. Fiverr with 2 R's is a lot of fun. If you haven't tried Fiverr, please go and try Fiverr. It's everything on there is $5. We're getting little animations made for websites and a whole lot of cute little things in Fiverr. A lot of the voiceovers that we use, we're using Fiverr. We can just flick it away, $5 later, we get it back in a few hours later, all done, professionally done, really good. And there's a whole lot of other brands that are on the slides as well, CrowdSpring, Design Crowd, SteUps and Fiverr and all sorts of things. The big one that's really changing the industry is staff leasing. Sometimes now called co-managed, and there are some incubation models in the form of seat leasing coming through as well. This is where the massive growth is up here. It developed after they observed the failure of the corporate BPOs in the SME market. The leader of the field, or the big one in the field, is microsourcing. I personally started in microsourcing 4 years ago. I still have some staff in microsourcing, a team in microsourcing. It sold at the beginning of this year to Salmart in Australia, so now the majority shareholder is an Australian listed company. Some others coming through behind it. Cloud Staff are Australian owned and growing quite rapidly as well. Your Virtual People is a local one owned by a local girl that I know here, Miss Loader, who used to be doing the tours with me. She's doing very well with that. Shore 360 is a new one coming through. Beepo, Zigzag, Clear Solutions, they're all staff leasing, all with different twists, different angles, and you need to study one against the other, work out which is best suiting you. But what they do is that they're very quick as a startup. They're low risk. You can ramp them up or downsize it well, so you can start with one seat and go to hundreds. The best way to view them is think of them like your landlord or your branch office. to build like your landlord, to build your branch office in. They provide the infrastructure, the office space, the desk, the computer. They legally employ the person. They provide the legal employment. They normally or often provide recruitment services. They will all provide HR services. The workplace laws up here are actually stricter in Australia, so they all want to keep control over their HR services. You nominate what you need, the type of person you need, and what skills you need, and how many you need, and how many you want to interview. They go off and do the fundamental recruitment, typically, bring you back a set number. You do the final interview of a small number, and then you have your say. You've got a say in the salary and the bonuses with most of them. You select your people. They're your people working for you, and you're with a big in capital letters for a good reason. They engage and sit them at a desk for you to instruct. They manage the behaviour. If they're late for work too often, taking too many funerals or whatever it is, they'll step in and help manage that behaviour for you. That's the behaviour. You manage, you train them, and you manage your work. They're your people. You hire, you fire, and you set the salaries. They're your people. I can't help but stress that. People up here quite often hire people and staff leasing things and then think the staff lease is going to do it all for them. They're only providing the space and somewhere for them to sit. You've got to work with them. They're a brilliant way to start and build your own team. Again, as I said before, only Filipino can manage Filipino, but you need an Australian overseeing. No, you don't have to come up here to the Philippines. Yes, it helps, but if you're really serious, then it really helps, okay? So if you're either going to be serious about sitting up here or not serious about it, if you're serious, get up here and have a look at it. But you can do it all from down there if you don't want to. It can be done. No, in 2 days on my tour, you won't fully understand the traps and opportunities. You need some time to learn the whole thing. And should you bring them to Australia? Yes. The best way to train them is to take them down to Australia, because half the training that you need to do is to Australianise them. They will Australianise a lot quicker in Australia than up here. Today I do bring managers up here training, but we also take a lot of them down to Australia to train. It works for us really good. So the staff leasing model is really about your people in your space with your culture. Mixed skills together in a work team environment, sharing tacit knowledge. That is how the majority of you are operating your businesses in Australia today. That's what's working when you go offshoring. Exactly the same thing. Don't change the model, just change the place you're doing it. Specialised services. We talked before about outsourcing. I said that many of you typically outsource. These are the type of things that you would normally outsource: accounting, legal, IT, networks and all that sort of thing, marketing, engineering, call centres, the things you would typically outsource. Some of the brand names are the ones that we visit while you're up here. There's lots of them here. The accounting is probably the best one for me to pick on. There are accountancy firms up here that are targeting Australian SMEs. In other words, they're not doing the back office works for Australian accountancy firms. They're working directly with you, exactly the same way as your Australian local suburban Australian accountancy firm would work for you. Exactly the same, except without the tax advice. But here they're charging $20 per hour for what you are often paying $200 to $300 an hour for down in Australia. And the quality is coming through and improving very, very quickly. It is getting as good as it is in Australia, in some cases better. So when you hire specialised services up here, you can expect to pay between $15 and $30 an hour. That's a retail number. Many of them white label in the business, but the big trend is they're now getting rid of white labelling, not wholesaling anymore, and they're moving across to selling directly to the SMEs. So my girls are waving at me. I didn't know whether I had a question then or not, but it'll come back up. So in summary, don't incorporate. It exposes you to corruption and the manual bureaucratic nightmare. Corporate BPOs, which is the full solution. 20 years ago it worked for the big guys. It doesn't work for the little guys. I get a lot of people wanting to outsource, want somebody to do it all for them. I'm sorry guys, but at these cheaper rates it's not going to happen. Freelancers are there, the virtual independents, typically home-based, occasionally small teams. It's in green because a lot of you are still using that and will continue using that. Crowdsourcing, specialised solutions, quick answers for very quick tasks. Staff leasing, co-managed or incubation, it's in green because it's the big boom. developed after observing the failure of the corporate BPOs, and specialised services, which is outsourcing, is what you might normally outsource to at home. You can do it up here at much, much cheaper prices. All right, so what we're going to do now is change the pace, and we're going to look at some actual business models that are being used up here to tap into this $100 a week Filipinos. The first one is the one I've been talking about all the way through. This is actually a staff leasing office. This is a multitask team. Very typical, your people, your space, your control, your culture. Often used for back office processes, accounting, anything IT, computer coding, marketing, design, drafting, engineering. All mixed people in there, exactly the same as you would in Australia. You'd have your engineer sitting in one part of the office, you'd have your wages being done in another part of your office, your accounts receivable over there, salesperson over there, exactly the same. Well, that's what you can do up here with a multitask team, exactly the same way. It's an interesting story. This is a story about an American company in one of the BPOs that we visit here. And what they've been doing it for 4 years, is they have about 900 data miners, 900 of them, and they're measuring roofs. They're getting aerial shots, not too dissimilar to this shot here, and they get little pointers, and they put little red dots on the corner of each part of the roof, and those little red dots automatically measure the pitch of the roof and the size of the roof. They then record the street address, they record the type of roof, and they record the size of the roof and put that into a database. And 900 workers have been working their way through the whole of the USA. I have no idea how many roofs they measure a day. I should imagine it's an enormous number. And you can imagine what they can sell that data for. So guys, this is the ultimate in data mining. You hear the word data mining all the time. There are all different ways of data mining, but it's quite common to see these type of operations up here where you're using stuff like photographs and video to be able to measure things with a human being, and it's cost effective because of the low wages here. Couldn't be able to do it anywhere else. This is the next one here is a company from actually the Gold Coast. Whilst they don't actually sell swimming pools, they sell something similar to swimming pools, and I shared his story with his permission, as long as I change the exact product. But it's so similar, it's not funny. So what they do is they have a couple of Filipinos here, and they're working their way through Google Maps. This is a shot of Google Maps. This is a street somewhere in thing, and if you can see there, number 11, it's got a swimming pool. Number 10's got a swimming pool. Number 8's got a swimming pool. The one underneath the orange bit, number 15's got a swimming pool, but number 13 in the middle has no swimming pool, and it's got a nice big backyard. Therefore, it's an ideal target. So what they do is they take a snapshot, exactly as you see here, of the house. They then draw that circle around it, and then they add on it a box, a little bit like I've drawn here. Is this your house? How about a pool or a spa in your backyard? Go online to this website or phone us and let us explain how to do it. They then click print, and a printer in Australia prints it. And in Australia, the guy comes through once a day, picks up all the printed flyers, if you want to call them that, goes round and puts them in the mail and mails them off. And this is a really, really cost-effective way of generating leads. Exact targeting for the exact market with the need. And I know the guy, I know his numbers, and I'll tell you what, this and another models very similar to this are very effective ways of changing how we're doing the marketing. The next one here is a little bit interesting. It's an operation that was Australian, that was started from by an Australian mate of mine actually with a partner, and they sold out about 5 years ago to New Zealand Post. So it's an operation up here, a BPO operation up here today. It's 100% owned by the New Zealand Post. And New Zealand Post in New Zealand, they don't have postcodes in their mailing system there. And they built a big mail sorting facility in Auckland. And the parcels come in trucks, and they're dropped into a chute thing, and they fall down the chute. And as they're going down the chute, they've got these cameras angled around which are detecting the address on the parcel. There's also a barcode on the parcel as well. the camera detects the address, the computer optically reads the address, and then looks at the database, and if there's something wrong with the address, maybe too many numbers in that street, the street's misspelt, the street doesn't exist, the suburb's misspelt, or something's wrong with it, an image of that appears on a screen in the Philippines, and within 4 seconds a Filipino corrects the problem. And to watch it in action is truly amazing. They're all sitting there in a line going at 100 miles an hour, flick, 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 changing their addresses. And to do that, they've had to learn virtually every street and every suburb in New Zealand. And they do it in 4 seconds. So when the parcel hits the bottom, the computer said, okay, this is the actual address for that barcode. And then when it gets to the first swipe, which is probably North Island, South Island, it manages to send it off to the correct address. And from then on, that barcode's known as that address. It's amazing to watch, but it makes you wonder where we're going to go with this offshoring and some of the things that we can do with the much cheaper labour and with the technology that we've now got in combining the two. This one is American. It's an American friend of mine, a radiologist. The rough numbers are that in the West we're paying about 120 grand a year for a radiologist. One person reads the x-rays. One person reading x-rays, I hate to say this if you've had x-rays recently, but there's a reasonable size mistake margin. One human being doesn't always get it right. And what they're doing is they're doing the x-rays in the USA. They flick them down here, where in separate rooms they have 3 separate radiologists, university qualified Filipinos, who are costing them $12,000 each a year. Read them, put the results into a computer program. The computer compares the 3 results. If it's exactly the same, then it flicks the result straight back to the hospital wherever the x-ray was taken as 100% accurate. And they're managing to return the x-rays back faster than you can get one person to read them from wherever they're coming from. So it's a third of the cost with no mistakes, and they're read faster. It's just a win-win for all the way around for the whole system. It really is. And I'm seeing a lot more things like this where you're getting multiple people reading things or making an assessment, and computers are comparing the assessment to get 100% accuracy. My last one is about a B2B marketing model. It's a story, it's actually a Brisbane company, and they're selling a device into hospitals. And what they did is and there's many others up here doing something very, very similar. It's the same model for the B2B anywhere now. What they do is they data mine the exact person they're after. So you can see the hospital, you can often go into the website and see the person in charge of the department. If they can't find that, they actually ring them and ask them. They then go and do some research on that person. They might find them in Facebook, they might find them in LinkedIn, or find another way of contacting them. And somewhere between that, they contact them, provide some information which warms the lead up. If the person reacts to that, then, and in this case, they've still got somebody in Australia that's going in to actually close the sale. To be able to do that process of going through businesses one by one, finding out exactly who the decision maker is, doing a bit of research on the decision maker, understanding and finding out how to contact him, would be impossible to do anywhere else. And it's being done here with phenomenal results. And I'm seeing that model over and over again. Lots and lots of businesses have changed their business market model over to exact targeting doing that. Dramatic lower wages and the lower wage costs with great education and core skills are a given. What's not understood is that if you set them up correctly, if you assess and select them correctly, and if you engage and encourage them correctly, all of which are a little different than Australia, then they are also more productive. Their productivity is higher. Many Aussie businesses stuff up offshoring, 53% to be exact, often because they see the savings but misunderstand the motivators and the structures. Guys, I teach how to avoid being in that 53%. I really do. I do have another webinar coming up. Watch out for the email in about 3 weeks' time. It's going to be all and only about engaging people. I'm going to really focus on the different employment strategies, how I personally collect people, how I target employing inexperienced people, and what I do if I have to employ experienced people. And I talk about the difference between the two. and the different strategies that you can employ there. I'll be talking about resumes versus testing, and I'll be giving some real practical testing results that I've used here, and how to assess salespeople. We've got some amazing salespeople up here now doing great stuff, but we've come up with some pretty innovative ways to assess the right ones to do the job and how to train them. And I'll be giving you tips on keeping them all on track and productive, how to actually manage them. So, and all I'm talking about in the next webinar is going to work for workers anywhere. It won't matter if you're hiring them in Australia, India, or the Philippines. It does no difference at all. The principles that I'm doing will work for them exactly the same everywhere. Those of you that know me are well aware that it is my passion to develop entrepreneurs. I have this absolute bent that the future of Australia can only come from entrepreneurs. I think we do a very poor job in Australia of developing and encouraging entrepreneurship. I think we encourage business managers. We encourage people to work in a job, not on it, not grow it. You know, I look at the mining industry and I say to that Lance Hancock and Holmes Accord, if they hadn't set that up years ago, we wouldn't be where we are today. The government didn't build their mining industry. Entrepreneurs did. I'm happy to discuss anything by phone anytime. Email me directly. My email address is mike@o'hagan.com.au. It's not hard. They did that because I can't even remember email addresses. So mike@o'hagan.com.au. No strings. It's my give back to develop entrepreneurs. Just be a little bit patient with me getting back to you. I live a semi-retired life nowadays and travel a lot, and sometimes I'm thinking everybody wants me to give them my phone number. I don't have one. I'm traveling all the time. I use a SIP phone in my little computer device to call you, so I do that. In about an hour, I cannot possibly explain everything about offshoring. So one has to question, why start without knowing what you're doing? If you want to avoid 53%, I run a tour, a 3-day intensive business learning tour in Manila here. It's 3 days. It's full on from early to late. We look at the theory. We visit lots and lots of places. We discuss what we're seeing as we go along. You'll learn so much from that. I get a lot of pre-startups coming up. If you're after a business idea or you want a new idea to start a new business in, the tours are fantastic for that. Micro, small, medium, large, and I've had a rush of large listed companies coming up here in the last 12 months. I've had over 300 people on tour in the last 12 months, and I've been doing it for 2 years. Everybody learns from it. Most of the people coming up engage in the Philippines, and many start initial businesses as well. So go and have a look at my tour, mikesmanilatours.com. Go in there. So guys, that's it. I hope you've learned out of it. Let's take some questions. And the first question is, how do I manage the instability of the Australian against the peso and the recent falls? Well, the thing is, I don't. The differences in costs between the two means that the 20-odd% recent variance hasn't really made a big difference to us at all. It's going to happen. Look, you can try and outguess it and hedge it if you want to. I've never been able to do that. I just go with the flow. I go up and down with the flow. I don't think, we don't manage it. I just go with it. As I said, I'm making so much money out of this. The margins are so wide that the variations haven't been a big problem at all. The next question is, what are the good ways to incentivize productivity with an offshore team? Well, it's a complex question. Filipinos don't work for themselves. We work for ourselves. Filipinos work for their family. Not all, a lot, most Filipinos give all of their salary back to the family. And then the family share it out amongst everybody in the family. A little bit like mini-communism in a way. It's an amazing thing to see, it really is. But what it means is that when they're working for you, they're generally speaking not getting their salary. It's been given to somebody else. So giving them more money in the form of a cash bonus really doesn't work very well. What actually works is something that they can personally benefit from. Believe it or not, a chocolate bar or food, and give it to them in front of their peers. They are very, very concerned about what other people think about them. And if the company acknowledges that they've done something great, gives them a chocolate bar in front of everybody, they will get more out of that, and you'll get more productivity out of that than you'll ever get out of giving them more money. It really is. So that's one tip. There's hundreds of other tips. We share them on tour. It's just a different way of thinking. It's part of the culture changes, the culture differences you've got to get used to. I've noticed that on Odesk it's common to see freelancers working ID 5 jobs at a time. What's the best way to ensure that they're only working for you? Look, I do that, and that's actually a problem. One of the biggest reasons that people can't use Odesk properly, in my opinion, is when you hire them for 20 hours a week. The issue is that what they're paid on Odesk is not a lot, and they need 40 hours to feed their family. Now, that's beyond the way we can think, because we've got way beyond this in our society. But they need 40 hours a week to just feed their family. You come along and you offer them 20 hours a week. Well, they're not dumb. They'll grab whatever they can get. So they start for you on 20 hours a week. They obviously spend the other 20 hours a week continuing looking for another employer. Because you've employed them on Odesk, in particular, and freelancers the same, they can see that profile in the back. And therefore that gives them more credence in the market, and they quite often very quickly get another job offer. The other job offer is often for 40 hours, and that's when they get smart. They decide, I can do you for 20 hours, they can work for you for 20 hours and work for the other guy for 40 hours, do a 60-hour week and make a lot more money. And then 2 or 3 months later it all gets wobbly, you're the smaller one in the basket, and suddenly your great worker goes from great to being ugly and not doing it well or disappearing, and then you run around saying this is bad. And it all started with the fact that I think you're the problem when you only gave them 20 hours a week. I think you should employ them for a good 40 to 50 hours a week, and you should make it very clear they're not allowed to work for anybody else. You can see if they're working for other people, that's not hard, right? And just be very clear about that. When I've employed anybody in Odesk full-time, I've always said to them, look, I know you're working for a couple of other people. You can continue doing that for 3 or 4 weeks, but in 3 or 4 weeks' time, you've got to get rid of them. You've got to work for me. The reason we're going to have a 3 or 4 week overlap is to make sure you and I both like each other, and we're going to settle down, and this is a long-term job. And I'm very clear about that and enforcing. So people like my PA have always been full-time. She's actually so busy for me she wouldn't have time to work for anybody else anyway. But that's what's causing, that's one of the biggest issues. Staff leasing. Can providers register on them, or are these companies themselves, and what are the typical rates for staff leasing? Well, that was on the slide. The rates are on the slide, I think. I don't know if I called them out. Staff leasing, staff leases provide the legal entity for the employment. Now, it's not unusual to have workers in a different legal entity. Mini Movers has, I think, about 4 legal entities in Australia which employ our workers. So it's not unusual to have workers in a different legal entity than if you like, the brand that they represent. So they provide the legal entity. The rates, look, the rates are varying at the moment, but between $7 and $10 an hour is fairly typical for staff leasing. Depends on how many services they're going to add in, but and there are different ways of doing it. But typically $7 to $10 an hour all up. That includes the computers, the desk, the legal entity, them doing the wages and everything else. If you think that's high, look at your Australian workers, then take the number of workers you've got in the office space you've got, take the cost of the office space and divided by the number of workers and bring that down to an hour. That's how much your office space is costing you per hour. Then look at your up costs of your work cover and all those and that. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to hit, there's no way known it's going to be below $25, if not $30, $35 an hour. So you've got to compare apples to apples. You're not comparing $700 a week to $7 to $9 an hour. You're comparing the actual real end cost to the cost of the person. Manufacturing, yes, on my tour we do manufacturing. I took the slides out today. I did have some slides around manufacturing in here. There are quite a few Australian manufacturers up here. It's growing rapidly. People are pulling out of China and coming here as well. So the tour includes manufacturing. And it's a thing. It's quite interesting that I've got a guy up here that employs motor. I've got 2 guys up here that employ motor mechanics. Motor mechanics are $84 a week. for a motor mechanic, and you can do a lot with them. And factory hands are really, really cheap in some of the other areas as well. So yes, there is manufacturing up here. You've got to do it in special zones, special freeport zones. You need to keep away from mainland Philippines, and you need to keep away from their normal customs here. But I can explain that to anybody who wants to know that later. So how is data protection best managed for service companies who retain a lot of personal information for clients? Look, on tour you're going to visit some stuff that'll make your hair curl. You really are. There's a company up here that processes the immigration cards coming in and out of Australia, the little green cards you fill out when you come in and out. There are all sorts of technical ways to protect your data, depending on how confidential it is, how much protection it is. There is all sorts of different ways of doing it. Most SMEs don't bother much. I don't. We don't. We've never had anybody try and steal our database and stuff like that, and we don't process any credit card numbers or any confidential stuff here anyway. As such, we use online portals with their own security doing that, and we don't see the actual numbers up here at all. But there are lots of different ways of doing that, and I can certainly introduce you to people that'll, to technical people that'll come in and help you settle those things up properly. Mike, are there any issues when you have to let somebody go? We have downgraded one area and have let somebody go. It's best to give them long notice and how much will it affect my small team. You're talking about in a staff leasing situation. There are two types. It's a complex story. Most of them are using project employees, which means they have to give at least 1 month's notice. And generally speaking, if you pay them a month's notice, you can get out of all of the systems. If you're using the normal Filipino employment system, for the first 6 months, what we call non-regulated, fundamentally that's kind of like a trial period where you can get rid of them. You have to do still some little processes, but once they become regulated, it becomes a lot more difficult, and you do have to go through a structured warning process. That may scare a few people, but I've got to tell you the penalties are really low, and it's not really such a big issue. But that's why you're using staff leases with their own HR departments. They take care of all that problem for you. But if you're using staff leasing, generally speaking, 1 month's salary and you got rid of one, that's easy. And you can do some stuff at the start around setting benchmarks for training assessments and get rid of them without a month's notice if you need to. There are ways around it. Once again, a little bit of a deep subject. I can share that with whoever wants to share it later. No problems. What's the actual cost of putting up a small BPO? Establishment costs nothing. You just walk in and sign up. They've changed a bit now. When I first did it, I didn't pay my first invoice till 90 days after I started. That was the first time I paid any money to anybody. My staff had already been working for me for 90 days. Nowadays, some of them want 1 or 2 months up front for a security, or up to 3 months up front for the security. They do that because when their customers, when you guys go bad on them as a customer, it's hard for them to recover, and it normally takes them 3 months to work out you're bad. So typically they're asking for 3 months up front. Normally it's some sort of security. The rest of it's easy. Very, very easy to engage. Once again, come up on tour and we'll show you how they do that very easily. For building for a web development team, is it better freelancing or using staff leasing? Well, if you use the word team in there, you're better off staff leasing. Web development requires at least 3, if not 4 different people involved in developing a website. You, the owner of the business, know how you sell and flog your products. You have to have input. You need to wireframe out, you need somebody to wireframe out the type of website it is and where everything's likely to be laid. That wireframe needs to go off to a graphic designer who does the graphic design. It goes backwards and forwards, toing and froing. A usability person needs to look at it then to make sure you've got the usability down to as simple as it can. It's really easy to use. An SEO person needs to come in and have some input about the online SEOing as well. Once everybody agrees and the graphic design looks good and you've got all those other bits looking good, the very last thing you do is the very simple thing, which most people do first, which is crazy. You give it to a coder and the coder codes it. That's the simple bit. That's the really simple bit. And just a tip, guys, I'm doing everything in WordPress nowadays, and the reason I'm doing that is I'm sick and tired of getting locked into contracts. I'm sick and tired of using programs out there to build websites and stuff that nobody else can work on. You change provider and nobody else knows how to work on it. With WordPress, I can change providers in a nanosecond. There's no problem. Anybody can go and work on them. But you need smart WordPress, people. There is some security issues. They can be tightened up if you know what you're doing. So you need to do that. So WordPress, if you're going to build a team of Webbies, I would suggest that you would put all that team together in one spot where they're all talking to each other and sharing with each other. If you're running them individually, you're heading for a train crash. So together in one spot for sure. And I think there's still a lot of market left up here for people to build really good web teams up here. That's teams with a plural, a lot of people together sharing to give really good results. I think the way it's being done by a lot of companies, especially on ODS, is wrong and causing a lot of the problems we've got out there. So what process do you use to track tasks and the results produced by the VA staff? Look, it depends on what your business is. You're all different. As I said, shared with you in the webinar, I'm using, we use some programs that do snapshots of the screen and report back how long they're spending on everything. Time Doctor and WorkSnaps are two common ones. Of course, ODS has its own one. And I have managers watching everything very closely. You've got to, as I said, you've got to be across them. You've got to manage them. You've got to watch them. I've got a tier here. I've got managers watching down through, as you would with anything else. So, guys, that seems to be it, I think. No? When's the next tour? The next tour is, I think we've got some dates left in April. I'm not 100% sure. I'm actually going on holidays, disappearing off the planet of the Earth. Tomorrow morning I'm going zip and disappearing for a few weeks. I think there's some dates in April available, and I think May's been coming up as well now. The dates when we release them do get booked out rather quickly. You do have to grab a date and make a decision about a date. We do have quite a pool of people that keep missing out on the dates, and when we release a new date, they grab it. Otherwise they miss out and get chucked off to a date that really doesn't suit them. So April coming up. Go into the Mike's Manila Tours website. Mike's, plural, Mike's Manila is the word, Manila Tours, plural again, tours.com, and there's a form in there. Just put your information in the form. The lovely Miss Emma will be back to you very quickly. She's my PA, and she'll give you the tour dates and the costs and what we do and what's expected and everything else. But if you're coming up on tour, please bring business cards. You've got no idea how many people don't read the instructions and come up here without business cards. You're going to go through a stack of them up here. You're going to be meeting people that are really worthwhile to you, helpful to you, and you need to be able to exchange business cards. And it is 3 days full on. You won't get time to scratch yourself. We have Wi-Fi in the van when you're driving along. You can still do your emails a little bit. But it is learning. Your brain is going to get absolutely stopped in information, and you're going to come away with a lot of ideas, and people are using it. It's been very, very successful for me, the tours. And that's it, guys. We're going to crank it up now. If anybody else has got any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Email me, mike@o'hagan.com.au. Send me an email. You can text me. Do not ring me on my mobile phone. I do not take voice calls on the phone. The voice system, most countries I'm in the countries I'm going to tomorrow, I'm going to Myanmar, to Burma, for instance, and only 10% of Burma's got cell phone coverage. So you can text me on that mobile up there if you want to. Otherwise, email me on my thing. I thank everybody for attending. I hope you've learned, and as I said, happy to talk to anybody at length about anything else. Happy to talk on email or on the phone. Thank you very much. Enjoy, learn, and hope to see some of you on tour in the near future. Thank you very much.